Hi, my name's Duncan. This is my 1893 Salvesen coal-fired steam car. Coal-fired steam was de rigueur from about 1850 to at least till about 1893, 1894, because there was, petrol hadn't really been invented, or wasn't practical. So this is the last of the line of the coal-fired steam cars. And maybe there might be 8 or 10 left in the world, but this is the only one that's still running. There's a company called Christian Salvesen that people might have heard of. They used to have lorries running up and down the M4, the M6, and they were a haulage company, but Christian Salvesen was a Dane who came to Scotland in the 1850s. Oh, hang on a second, hang on. Bit of maintenance. He came to Scotland in the 1850s. His son, Henry Salvesen, was an enthusiastic Victorian engineer, fascinated by anything mechanical, and of course cars were the new thing. They're like space travel to us now. They were almost unattainable, but because he was an engineer, because he had a shipyard, he fancied building himself a car, and he had no intention of selling it to anybody. It was probably the most useless thing for going anywhere, because it takes an hour and a half to get it to go. It dribbles oil out of every orifice, so it was just a passion project. And he made the components in his shipyard in Grangemouth. He assembled it in a workshop at his stately home in Scotland, and he used to trundle around his stately home, sort of probably annoying his neighbours and annoying his friends, but it was just a passion project for Henry. The car, within a year of him building the car, he started to realise that he could make some improvements. And it is fitted with the Daimler axle in 1896, and that's what introduced him to cars as we know it today. And within a few months of buying the Daimler axle, he then bought a whole Daimler. And he realised that oil essence probably was going to catch on, and that was the end of the coal-fired steam era. The car was not used until he died, and it was sold to a crisp magnate, if there is such a thing, who was a collector of cars. He didn't do anything with them, he just stored them in sheds at his crisp factory in Glasgow. There's a guy called John Sword. And when he died in the 60s, there was a massive auction. It was probably the first classic car auction that we had in the UK, and they sold off all his collection over 4 days. And this car was sold to another collector, a chap in Norfolk called George Milligan. He had the car in his collection, didn't use it until 2004, when his collection was sold, and a friend of mine bought it. And I fell in love with it in 2004, and when poor old John became unwell, I bought it from John about 5 years ago. But my passion for Victorian cars goes back to my father, who thinks anything made after 1900 is modern. So it's sort of, when you're 17, you don't want to do what your father does because it's not very cool. But when I became 55, I suddenly thought, well, I can't fancy a Victorian car again. So hence, it is my favourite car. I know it seems silly, I've got some very good cars, but it is my favourite car. I don't drive it. My wife drives it, my friends drive it, and I love doing all this bit. Hang on a second. I just love doing all the sort of firing the steam, looking after the coal. We are running on synthetic coal this year, part of the Goodwood ethos of renewable energy. So the coal we're running on is made from olive stones, molasses, coffee grindings, which sadly I thought would smell like a pizzeria, but it doesn't. It smells more like a sort of those cheap stink bombs you used to buy as a kid. But anyway, it's quite nice to have a fully sustainable coal-fired steam car. Steam engines are very reliable because there's not much to go wrong. As long as you've got something to boil the water, that's all that happens. And as long as you can. When I first bought the car, I bought it at a Bonham's auction the night before the London-Brighton run, and went on the Brighton run the next day and drove to Brighton. There was more steam going up my trousers than there was going to the engine, which is about the only thing that can go wrong. Once you can sort of direct the steam where it should be, this thing will take 8 people to Brighton up a 1 in 6 hill without batting an eyelid, as long as you've got the steam going to the right place. They're sort of actually. The way that steam works, we were doing some runs around the paddock yesterday and runs up to the house to deliver people to the party. It's like electric. It's like an electric car. It produces maximum torque at 0 RPM, so you can silently whisper up behind people, and then you obviously blow the whistle. But anyway, no, it's a lovely way of transport. It's just desperately inefficient on fuel. The more primitive, the closer to the zenith of motoring, from my point of view, is the more interesting. So to have something that's so old, there's a sea change from coal to petrol. Like the Beast of Turin that's behind the steamer, the Beast of Turin was the last of the line of the big engine cars. If you want to go fast, you put a big engine in. If you want to go faster, you put a bigger engine in. That was obviously, there's a limit, there's a cul-de-sac of technology. So the same with the steamer. So it's quite nice to have a car that's the last of the line of the coal-fired cars, and an Edwardian racer car that was the last of the line of the big engine Edwardian cars. We use it'll run for about 10 miles on 40 gallons of water, so it uses about 4 gallons a mile of water. The problem is coal, because you obviously can't buy coal en route. So on the day before the London Brighton run, I tend to drive down, leaving bags of coal in pubs. There's a chap by Crawley who's got a garden very close to the road, and we stopped for water there. So I knocked on the door last year and said, "Can I leave a bag of coal in your hedge?" So as long as you can pick up coal on the way down, it's not too bad. So it uses maybe a third of a ton of coal, and maybe 400 gallons of water to do 60 miles to go to Brighton. But in terms of, I don't drive the car. My wife drives it, my friends drive it. I ride on the back running the boiler because it's the most important thing. I mean, the most interesting job. So you're trying to manage how much steam you produce. Because without the steam, you don't have any go, but you also don't have any stop. Because whilst it has brakes, it has these sort of useless paddles on the back wheels. Those brakes are fine as long as the car's not actually moving. If it's moving, you have no chance of stopping it. So you use the steam to stop it as well as go. So the uphill bits are great because it'll go up the side of a house with 160 PSI. But going downhill, you just got to be careful that you've got enough steam, because without the steam, you have no brakes. When I was invited to Festival of Speed, it's always lovely to get invited to the Festival of Speed. I always feel very honoured. And when I got the phone call about the Salvesen, I remember thinking, that's a bit odd, because it's the antithesis of speed. And when I was talking to one of the guys in the office, they said, "So what speed will it do?" And I said, "Well, 15 to 18 miles an hour." And one of the guys said, 80 miles an hour? I said, no, 18 miles an hour. So back in 1893, 18 miles an hour was pretty good. Even if you're on a horse, 18 miles an hour is pretty good. So that's pretty much about it. It will climb any hill you can possibly imagine, but top speed, it all gets a bit out of control above sort of 18 miles an hour. I mean, the best thing, for me, I'm always very humbled by getting invitations to Goodwood, because it is the pinnacle of all historic meetings across the whole world. I think most people will sell their granny, or certainly their granny's leg, to get an invitation to come here. And all these people come along to see the cars. And the thing that Goodwood do so well is that you could go to 1 million museums around the world. I mean, Mercedes and BMW and Porsche do a fantastic job with their museums. And museums are really important, but they're basically a barn full of dead cars. And you could walk past the sexiest car in the world, sitting there, amongst 1,000 other cars, and it just doesn't stir the soul. What's Goodwood is so good. Goodwood have the power, and certainly the Duke has the influence to get people to bring their cars out of these museums, get them to start them up, get them to drive around, get them to smell. I mean, this one smells particularly bad. I mean, that's the synthetic coal, whilst it's fabulous for the planet, it doesn't half stick. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's those smells, it's the noises, it's the emotions that are stirred, which Goodwood does so well. And I think that it's a great shame that there aren't effectively more of these events, because that's what inspires the young people. This weekend, I've had somebody from Uruguay, a family from Uruguay, with their 3 children, who's been saving up for 3 years to come to the Festival of Speed, just to see the Beast of Turin. But we got them on the steam car yesterday, and they were in tears because they've been to all the car museums, the station museums, and all these things they see on the internet, they see photographs of. But when you can get up close to them and touch them and smell them and burn your hands, it somehow brings it all alive and makes, renews that, inspires the sort of next generations to realise how important the history of this motoring is. And I think that's what Goodwood does so well.